Hey guys, it's Penguin here, and welcome back to another gold making video. In this video, this is going to be part 7, I believe, of our Forgotten Item series, and if you're new to this, basically I'm going to be going over 5 different items that are deemed either forgotten or just not sold as often, or people leave them off the restock list, and just going over exactly why they are good and why you should add them to your list. So, like I said before, this is number 7 of this series. It has been quite a while since episode 6, but I will leave the playlist link down below, just in case you want to check out the rest of the episodes. I try my best not to repeat items. Sometimes, an item comes up and it does get repeated, but most of the time I try not to, so hopefully you guys can learn something from this, and we're gonna get right into it. So the first item I want to talk about is the Jewelcrafting clusters. So this is the gem sockets which people need to put into their gear, and actually I have made surprisingly a ton of gold. Now the reason why I deem this as forgotten is because I feel like a lot of people probably do not craft these items. Personally, as somebody who's doing legendaries and doing just a lot of prospecting, with all of those random gems that I get, I have a very bad habit of just vendoring them off because you get about 2.5 gold per gem and it just clears up my bag space and I don't have to worry about it. But somebody mentioned in the Discord, and I've started doing this recently, but I have actually taken the time, whether it's like as I'm doing homework or making dinner or just stepping away from my computer, I will actually craft these gems into clusters and selling them on the auction house. The perk of this is as long as it sells for over like 12 gold, you'll be making a profit because it requires 4 gems, and if you were to vendor those off, that's about 10 gold, and of course you have a vendor item to create this cluster as well. So with that being said, as long as you can sell this for over 12 gold, you're making profit. So yes, in TSM, the clusters may be negative profit. Thankfully, on my server, they're not. But even if they are technically negative, as long as you sell it over that vendor price, it is still going to be worth it. Also, like I said, for the people who do a lot of prospecting and haven't vendored these off, you probably have a ton just sitting in your bank or your guild bank. So all you have to do is kind of craft them up, and then you're good to go. They also have a great sale rate, and as I'm recording this video, you have heard some ka-chings, and that is actually some clusters selling. I'll make sure to show a screenshot on the screen. But yeah, I really think these sell super fast on my medium pop server, so if you were to do this even on a high or full pop, you will probably get even more sales as me. Might not be as much profit, but that is the first item that I want to talk about, and we're moving on to Goblin Gliders. So, Goblin Gliders have been, I believe, were a part of the first ever episode, but I did want to bring them back because they are super helpful. If you guys don't know, Goblin Gliders are basically just gliders that you can use to get to different areas, and the reason why this is so important is because it is super good for Korthia, where you cannot fly, and it will be good for 9.2, of course, until we unlock flying. So, as you guys probably know, there's some treasure chests on Korthia that are on like flying or floating islands, and so the only way to actually get there, unless you are like a demon hunter or something, you actually have to use a goblin glider. So that is the reason why these sell. Also, not everybody has flying in every single region. So for the people who don't, they of course want to buy gliders. And of course for 9.2, before we unlock flying or are able to, these will sell very well. They're also super cheap and easy to craft. They are from Draenor, and if you do not have the recipe already, all you have to do is go and learn it. It's super, super simple, and generally, you can pick up the items for pretty cheap. Now, of course, depending on your server, and somebody might already be in this market, so take a look at the true iron ore, and take a look, every few days or every few weeks. Sometimes on my server, I will purchase this item for 2 gold a piece or less than 2 gold a piece, and I'll check it again, like 3 days later, and it's up to 15 gold because somebody reset it or bought it out. So, of course, it does depend on your server, but Sumptuous Fur as well as True Iron generally can be bought pretty cheap, and gliders are super awesome. So that is basically it for number 2, and we're going to go on to number 3. So number 3 is going to be kind of similar, and this is going to be novice rings and necks. The reason why I say similar is because in the past I have talked about novice gear in general, but I feel like when I personally think of novice gear, I really forget about the rings and the necks. The reason for that is just, I think of novice gear, and gear comes to mind armor pieces, so helmets, chest plates, pants, etc. And I forget that jewelry crafting can also create these items, necks, and rings. And so for a very long time, I just kind of neglected jewelry crafting novice gear and the other Crafter's Marks gear as well. I'm not really highlighting those since they do require extra steps to unlock, but surprisingly, novice rings and necklaces have been selling pretty well. And of course, that does make sense, because if you think about it, if somebody's buying a whole brand new set of gear for their fresh level 50, they're also going to need to buy a necklace and a ring as well. So myself have kind of neglected them for a long time, and I bet there's somebody out there who's kind of in the same boat as me and has been focused on the tailoring and leatherworking and not as much on the actual rings and necklaces. So as long as you have a Shadowlands jewelry crafter, definitely craft up those novice pieces, and of course, if you have the Mark III or the Chained Isles, create those necklaces and rings as well, and you can make some profit as well. Alright, moving on, now we have the base old world mounts. Now what I mean by this is that these are just the very simple and cheap mounts that you can learn whenever you're leveling up old world tailoring. Now the one I want to highlight today is the Flying Carpet, which literally requires rank or level 1 in Northrend tailoring, so it's super easy to buy, and it's also really, really cheap. Now, surprisingly, since this is a mount that anybody can learn, it has a pretty good sell rate because, it's cheap, people want to complete their collections to get achievements, and it's just very simple for them to buy, so you can make some pretty good profit. Generally, I craft, 5 of these at a time, save them, post 1 on the auction house every time, and then eventually I'll run out and I'll just repost and recraft again. Now, the reason why I want to highlight this one is because of its crafting cost. If we look at the recipe, it only requires 4 items, and 2 of the items, the thread and the dye, are vendor items. So all you have to do is go to a tailoring vendor. I normally just go to Orgrimmar, but you can go wherever you want, and you just buy the green dye, buy a bunch of thread, and then you are set to go. The spider webs, which you need, are super cheap normally as well. Of course, they might be inflated due to a reset on your server, or they might be bought out sometimes, but generally I buy these webs for less than 2 gold a piece. And then lastly, you have the special frost weave cloth, which is probably the priciest item. Now, you can actually craft this yourself if you level up your Northrend tailoring a little bit more to about level 25. Then you can create this cloth yourself and possibly save yourself some money, but for simplicity and if it's still profitable, you can honestly just buy it off the auction house and then you can just craft from there. Of course, it just depends on you, and honestly, it might not be profitable until you take that extra stepping stone and craft those cloth yourself, but you'll just have to see. That's really just why I love this item, because it's so simple to craft, and people, want the reach 300 mount achievement, the 100 mount achievement, and they think this mount is just a simple buy and good for the collection. Now, I talk about the tailoring one specifically because that's what I know from personal experience. However, if you have, let's say, Outland Engineering, basic Outland Engineering will also have the flying machine, which is basically the same principle of this one. Very simple to craft. A lot of people need it just to finish out their collection, and this is also another one to craft. I personally wanted to highlight the Flying Carpet, but feel free to craft both, craft one of each, or, sometimes it might not always be profitable, but just keep checking back. That's the beauty of the old world markets. They kind of change a lot, especially if you're on a medium to low pop server. There's a lot of fluctuation with the prices just because there's not a lot out there. So just keep an eye out and hopefully you can make some profit with this item. But we're going to go to the final item right now. Then the last item that we're talking about is the Gluttonous Feast from Shadowlands. Now, the reason why this is on the list, it does require reputation, so this is one exception, but it requires Revered with the Court of Harvesters. But if you get this recipe, it's 100% worth it, and if you haven't gotten the recipe, I think you should. The reason for this is, as we know, for 9.2, we're getting a new feast, but the feast is not really craft worthy. What I mean by that is it's super cheap to craft, and then actual players have to buy it, place it down, and contribute items in order to get the feast to work. And it gives the same stats as the Gluttonous Feast. So honestly, most people, it's probably going to be cheaper for them to just buy this Gluttonous Feast instead of the new one. So this is still probably going to be the best in slot feast for 9.2, and as we know, all of the raiders are going to come back, the hardcore Mythic Plus players, all of that, and they're going to want feast in order to do their best. So if you haven't gotten the recipe already, I highly recommend doing that rep grind. You need Revered, so on one character, if you played Shadowlands throughout this time, you probably have that reputation on some character. And the great thing about this is that cooking is a secondary profession, which means you can literally have it on all and any characters. So as long as you have Revered rep somewhere, get cooking on that, level it up, and then you're good to go. I will say, in my personal experience, the feast is pretty off and on. It kind of depends on the fish market on my server, but every once in a while, it will have like 50 plus gold profit, and then, 2 days later, it'll be negative 25 gold. So I don't know if it's very similar across the board on multiple servers like that, but just be on a lookout. If you learned the recipe or are looking at the recipe currently and it's in the negative, I highly recommend either checking before or after reset day, depending on when you're watching this video. And of course, just, keep an eye on that market. If you can ever buy super cheap meat or super cheap fish, that will contribute to it as well. But yeah, guys, that is basically it. I've tried to make this video short to make it more appealing to everybody and to just get through the information as fast as possible. Now, of course, if you do prefer my longer videos, feel free to let me know. But I hope you enjoyed. Make sure you join the Discord down below if you want to join the part of our community, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and of course, have a good day.